She stitched beauty out of breath and prayer. Mama Folake's hands were wrinkled maps of work palms tough, fingertips tender guiding a needle like a tiny lightning bolt. Her body was tired. Her spirit was not. In a shop no wider than 2 outstretched arms, she turned plain cloth into confidence, sorrow into celebration. Customers arrived with dreams and hope. Her bones might ache, but her warm smile never dimmed. Others saw fabric. She saw stories. And every day, she told them one careful seam at a time. Sit back and find out as we dive into this powerful and heartwarming story. In the heart of Nigeria, where market drums throb and dust glitters in afternoon light, a woman stitched beauty out of breath and prayer. Mama Folake's hands were wrinkled maps of work palms tough, fingertips tender guiding a needle like a tiny lightning bolt. Her body was tired. Her spirit was not. In a shop no wider than 2 outstretched arms, she turned plain cloth into confidence, sorrow into celebration. Customers arrived with dreams. She measured them in inches and hope. Power might fail, rent might rise, bones might ache, but her warm smile never dimmed. Others saw fabric. She saw stories. And every day she told them one careful seam at a time. Morning broke softened gold on the corrugated roofs as Mama Folake unlocked her door. The tiny bell chimed, announcing a sanctuary of thread, thimble, and faith. She swept the floor in slow arcs, lifting yesterday's dust like forgotten worries. Her iron warmed. Steam whispered over Ankara prints, waxing their colors awake sunflower yellows, river blues, and pepper reds. A chipped measuring tape curled like a sleeping snake across the table. She kissed the head of her old singer machine, the way a farmer pats loyal soil. Customers drifted in with shy smiles and folded dreams. "Good morning, my people," she sang, taking measurements, noting posture, catching the way a woman tugged at her sleeve as if hiding from the world. "Don't worry," Mama said. "We will sew you brave." By noon, the market outside roared hawkers calling, buses sneezing smoke, but her shop stayed steady, a quiet drumbeat in the noise. Needle up, needle down. Every stitch was a small yes against the day's demands. When hunger knocked, she poured water, broke bread, and kept sewing. Beauty, she believed, was a kind of bread too. Hands that remember. The machine purred and memory rose. Her mother's voice still lived in the rhythm. Hold the fabric like a hand you love, firm but gentle. As a girl, Folake had watched hems fall right where joy began, watched customers twirl and forget their burdens. Now age was a shawl across her shoulders, yet her fingers still danced. She sorted buttons like rosary beads, each one a prayer for someone's tomorrow. A widow brought worn cloth that smelled faintly of camphor and rain. "Please," she said, "make it fit who I am now." Mama nodded. There were no patterns for grief, but there were lines for dignity. She let the fabric teach her, guided by grain and grace. When fatigue pinched her lower back, she paused to sip ginger tea. Through the doorway, sunlight tossed coins across the floor. She smiled at the memory of her first needle prick, how she'd cried, then laughed at the tiny dot of red. "Blood is part of the craft," her mother had said. "It means you're in it." Today, every careful seam felt like a promise kept to that childhood vow, to make elegance affordable and kindness the true lining. Before the market fully woke, Mama Folake stood in the doorway, greeting passers-by the way one greets weather-accepting, welcoming. "Good morning, Auntie." "Good morning, my brother," she called, and backs straightened, faces softened. The smell of frying akara drifted in. She tucked a bean cake into paper, chewed between fittings, and waved away payment from a schoolgirl with a torn uniform. "Bring me your report card," she teased. Her book of measurements brimmed with names and small notes. Bisi laughs like Belle. Jimoke walks with caution. Fef wants sleeves for hugging. Clothes she knew were biographies. She pinned without pricking, listening more than speaking, easing clients into mirrors they could trust. When the first generator coughed to life outside, she straightened her back and pressed the pedal. The machine whirred like a good story. A bride-to-be arrived, eyes wide as uncut satin. "Make me glow," the bride whispered. "You already do," Mama smiled, smoothing the cloth like a comforter on a hard day. She cut with reverence, as if trimming away doubt. The sun climbed, the street grew loud, and her tiny bell kept ringing like a small, persistent joy. To Mama Folake, color was dialect, she spoke it fluently. For heartbreak, she chose deep indigo with quiet patterns that held you like dusk. She let crimson laugh across the hips. For new beginnings, she loved soft teal, the color of river promises. She laid swatches before her clients, watched pupils bloom, and knew when a soul had recognized itself. A businesswoman came with shoulders squared like folded paper. "I need sharp lines," she said. Mama nodded, drawing darts that turned fabric into confidence. A grandmother arrived with a wrapper older than some stories. Mama stitched its edge so the tale could travel one more generation. A teenage boy fidgeted about his first suit. "Stand tall," she coached, pinning hems. "The world measures you, give it the right numbers." Outside, vendors bargained. Inside, she bartered with doubt. She added piping where a laugh should live, a flair where courage might step forward. Color, line, and cut, these were her verbs. When she pressed the finished seams, steam rose like incense. She breathed it in, thankful for work that made hands wise and eyes kind. Each garment left her table like a letter signed with care, sealed with hope. Evenings brought ache. The muscles of her lower back sang an old song, and her knees replied in creaks. She counted stitches not in numbers but in prayers, each one a bead against surrender. Rent had crept higher like a slow tide. Thread spools cost more. Light bills mocked her lamp. Still, she kept a small envelope tucked beneath the till, labeled tomorrow. Some nights the shop felt too quiet, the clock too loud. She would set the iron aside and rub shea butter into her hands, remembering the first day she opened, just 3 customers, all friends. Now her ledger was heavy with names, yet solitude sometimes pressed against the doorframe. Fatigue arrived like an uninvited aunt. She gave it a seat but not the room. When the lights blinked, she hummed a hymn and waited. Power returned in its own time. Work returned in hers. She reheated stew on a portable stove, dipped bread, and let pepper remind her lungs to expand. The world could be late, cruel, expensive. Her craft could not. Before sleeping, she covered the machine like a child and whispered, "Thank you for another day of making people whole." They came because she remembered them. "Last time we added extra room for your dancing," she'd say, and hips would sway, grateful. She kept scraps in labeled envelopes colors of people's seasons so alterations felt like reunions. Customers sent customers, and stories braided through the neighborhood. How Mama fixed a dress the morning of a funeral. How she embroidered joy onto a girl's graduation gown. How her smile could iron a bad day. A man arrived with a shirt torn at the pocket. "It's silly," he said. "It's my father's." There was no silly in this room. She mended it invisibly and stitched a small interior heart where only the wearer would know. He pressed the shirt to his face and wept, grateful for a stranger's careful hands. On Fridays, children peeped in to watch the needle dance. She let them touch the safe things, buttons, tape, chalk told them each tool's name like introducing friends. "Work hard," she said, "and be kind. The two together make miracles." The bell kept chiming. She kept noting measurements, teasing, advising, celebrating. Loyalty wasn't a program here. It was the seam that never broke. Deadlines gathered like evening birds. The wedding was in 3 days. The reception outfit in 2. Mama brewed ginger and cloves, lit her lamp and invited the night to sit. She trimmed whispers of Saturn until they obeyed, coaxed a stubborn zipper into humility, eased a sleeve to kiss a shoulder just so. Outside, motorcycles coughed and faded. Inside, holiness happened in small increments. At midnight, fatigue folded her like fabric. She stood anyway. The hem must not ripple. The lining must not complain. She pricked her finger and sucked the sting, eyes watering, not from pain but from the nearness of beauty. To close her eyes now would be betrayal. She pressed, stitched, checked and rechecked. When dawn cleaned the sky, she hung the dress high where light could read it. It glowed. "Well done," she told the empty room, though the words were for herself, her mother, and every woman who ever bartered sleep for excellence. She washed her face in a plastic bowl, tied her headscarf and opened the door to morning. The bell rang. She smiled. The dress waited, perfect as a promise kept. Saturday flooded the street with color-head raps like flags, laughter like maracas. The bride arrived with aunties and applause, and when Mama unveiled the dress, the room inhaled as one. The fabric held light the way palms hold water carefully, miraculously. The bride swayed, the hem listened. The waistline surrendered its doubt. "You look like the day the world was made," an auntie said, and everyone clapped. Payment was counted, but the true currency was delight. Outside, a little girl pressed her face to the window, eyes wide as saucers. One day, Mama whispered to her through the glass, tapping the measuring tape against the pane like a wand. The child giggled. By afternoon, orders piled up: burial cloth, church uniforms, a stage outfit for a singer who promised to say Mama's name on the mic. She nodded and wrote carefully. Pride nudged her ribs, gentle but firm. "Keep steady." She closed for 1 hour, ate jollof under the awning, and let the rice remind her that simple things can be royal. Then she returned to the machine, grateful to be needed and needed to be grateful. The bell rang again. Work was a blessing. The lights died in the middle of a top stitch. Silence, then street noises rushed in: hawkers, horns, the distant grumble of generators she could not afford to run all day. Mama sighed, rolled the fabric and reached for her hand needle. Machines rest. Hands do not. She stitched by window light, each pass precise, each knot small as a seed. A storm shouldered the sky and made afternoon look like evening. Rain knocked the roof in loud syllables. She moved garments away from the wall, set basins where leaks confessed themselves, and kept working. Water found its path. So did she. The storm passed, leaving puddles that held temporary suns. Power crept back, humming like a guilty child. She forgave it with a flip of the switch. A customer burst in, drenched and frantic. Her ceremony had moved earlier because of the weather. "Please." Mama nodded, wrung the hem dry with a towel, and warmed the iron. Steam rose, the cloth relaxed, and crisis became merely a story with a neat ending. "Go," Mama said, fastening the last hook. "Enter good things." The woman hugged her and ran out laughing. The bell shook, proud of its own small thunder. Some repairs were simple split seams, rebellious zippers. Others were complicated garments that carried disappointments in their folds. A woman arrived with a blouse she had bought too small, convinced that shrinking into it would fix something inside. It had not. "Can we add?" she whispered. "A little kindness?" Mama smiled and inserted a panel so discreet even the mirror would keep the secret. An elderly man brought trousers that belonged to better days. "They used to fit," he said, patting his softer middle. "Life has been sweet," Mama teased, letting out the waistline with a grace that honored both memory and present joy. He laughed until tears stood like dew. Children outgrew wonder and sleeves. She lengthened both. She stitched breast pockets deep enough for bus money and courage. She added strong hems for women who walked far. The shop, people said, smelled like starch and second chances. She was careful with. Compliments do tight and they pinch, too loose and they fall away. Wear what loves you, she counseled. Outside, the world rushed. Inside, pace slowed to the speed of care. Needle up, needle down. A life. Mended. Whispers edged along the market's spine. Another tailor across the lane offered cheaper, faster. A few customers drifted, tempted by the math. Mama did not chase. She tightened her quality, not her voice. She double-checked seams, lined skirts so they moved like good conversation, and made every pickup a small celebration. When the cheaper garments frayed, some returned with apologies in their eyes. She welcomed them without sermon. Sit, she said, pinning gently. We will make it right. Jealousy passed the shop like a stray dog, sniffing for scraps. Mama gave it none. She greeted the rival with a nod, sent overflow work to newcomers, and corrected a young apprentice's grip without shame. We win by serving, she reminded herself, pressing a crease so sharp it could cut a frown. Orders evened out. Trust deepened. The ledger smiled. One evening, the rival's machine broke. The woman stood outside, embarrassed. Mama loaned her a spare needle and a spool of black thread. Return it when you can, she said. In markets and in life, generosity is the brand that never goes out of style. The community center sought uniforms for a cultural showcase. 12 dancers, 6 drums, 1 heartbeat. They asked for something that moved like praise and held like home. Mama sketched by lantern light, lines flowing like talking. She chose fabrics that looked like sunrise over red soil and rain on tin roofs. When she cut a rhythm. When she sewed, she joined a chorus. Fittings were joyful chaos, anklets jingled, giggles spilled, patterns debated. She taught them how a garment asks you to stand dignified. Lift your chest, she said, so your story can breathe. On the night of the show, she took a seat in the back. Hands folded, smile loose as a scarf in wind. The dancers leapt, turned, and landed with costumes that understood them. The crowd rose. Someone shouted her name. She shook her head, shy, but her heart answered, yes. Afterward, mothers brought food to her shop, fried plantain wrapped in paper, stew in a plastic bowl, gratitude in bright wrappers. She ate with spoon and laughter, humbled that thread could tie a whole neighborhood together and call it beautiful. Prices jumped like startled goats. Fabric that was friendly last month now acted like royalty. Mama ran fingers over bolts she could no longer entertain and made new math from old wisdom. She turned remnants into pockets and artful trims. She pieced contrasting panels so purposeful they looked designed from the start. Waste left her shop ashamed of itself. Customers felt the pinch. She offered payment plans, split orders into essentials and later luxuries, and taught a few to care for garments so they could last longer than trends. Cold water, she instructed, scribbling care notes. Shade, not sun. She mended for free when pride kept people away. The till was thinner, her faith thicker. On the hardest day, when the ledger frowned and her back scolded, a small envelope appeared under the door, no name, just for Mama. Inside, crisp notes and a scrap of paper. You dressed me for my interview. I got the job. She pressed the note to her chest. Some profits cannot be counted, only held. She locked the door, prayed short and honest, then unlocked it again. Work awaited, and work was mercy. They arrived without noise, 2 women from the local council, clipboards tucked like secret wings. Mama wiped her hands and offered stools. They asked questions, peered at seams, lifted linings. "Me hear your name," one said simply. Mama nodded, unsure. The women took measurements of impact. Apprentices trained, community supported, fees waived when hearts were heavy. "We measure these too," the other smiled. A week later, a letter came with an embossed seal. Her shop would be recognized at the town festival for excellence in craft and compassion. She traced the words with a shy finger, then tucked the letter behind a framed photo of her mother. "We did it," she whispered to the woman in black and white. The award day was all sun and singing. A sash brushed her shoulder, and a plaque found her palms. She spoke briefly, voice steady. "Fashion is not vanity, it is dignity. Thank you for letting me serve." Cheers rose like birds startled into joy. That evening, she placed the plaque on a high shelf, not to look down on anyone, but to remind herself what work looks like when love leads. Young hands began to gather, curious, eager, unsure. Mama arranged them around the table, assigning each a corner of the craft. "You," she told one, "learn to cut. It is listening with scissors." To another, "Iron is the peacemaker between fabric and form." To the quiet boy by the door, "Thread for me. Patience starts small. Mistakes happened, the kind that teach humility faster than lectures." A sleeve got twins where it wanted to be an only child. A hem waved like the sea. Mama unpicked without anger, her seam ripper moving like gentle truth. "Good," she said to a trembling girl. "Now you know what wrong feels like. It will guide you toward right." They learned her small rituals, how to warm the iron like greeting a friend, how to store pins like you mean to see tomorrow. She made them stitch name labels into aprons, not to claim ownership, but to remember responsibility. As evening fell, she let them lock the door. "One day," she smiled, "this key will feel light in your hand." They looked at one another, startled by the size of the trust, then stood taller inside their borrowed courage. Morning stiffness held on longer these days. Mama negotiated with her knees, bribed her back with heat, and offered her wrists small circles of relief. She moved slower but not less certain. Customers adjusted to her pace the way ships adjust to a wiser tide. "Take your time," they said, discovering that patience is also a fitting. She delegated more. Apprentices cut under her watching eye. The quiet boy's stitches now marched in disciplined rows. She corrected with a nod instead of a lecture. Authority, she'd learned, can be soft and still command the room. In the mirror, she saw new lines at the corners of her eyes and thought, "These are seams too, holding me together." One afternoon, a sudden dizziness folded her onto the stool. The shop tilted, then righted. She sipped water, breathed, and let the youngest apprentice fan her with cardboard. "I am fine," she assured them. But later she allowed herself a nap on 2 pushed-together chairs, a wrapper for a blanket. When she woke, the work had moved forward without her. Pride warmed her like tea. Legacy, she realized, is not a monument. It's relief you can rest into. A journalist came, tape recorder blinking like a curious eye. "What is your secret?" he asked. Mama laughed. "No secret. Just see people." He pressed. She refused to make mystery of simple devotion. The article ran anyway, photos of her hands, her chalk lines, her soft commanding face. Orders swelled, then settled. Fame flirted at the door. She let it pass. She hosted a small open day tea, puff puff, bolts unrolled like rivers. Customers shared testimonies. Jobs won, timid shoulders raised, grief clothed gently. The apprentices watched, astonished that thread could hold so much life. Mama packed leftover pastries for the woman who cleaned the stalls. "Style," she told the room, "is what kindness looks like when it wears cloth." Evening again, the bell gave one tired ring and retired. Mama tidied the table pins home, chalk-capped, tape-coiled. She pressed the day's final seam, lifted the iron, and admired the neatness that comes from time well used. Outside, the market exhaled. Vendors countered. Children chased shadows that stretched into tomorrow. She wrote a small note in her ledger, "Add pocket for courage," beside a young mother's name and slid it into the envelope marked tomorrow. Then she covered the machine, dimmed the lamp, and sat a moment in the cool. The apprentices had gone, their laughter trailing like ribbon. In the quiet, she heard all the stories her hands had helped speak, and all the ones still waiting at the edge of cloth. She locked the door, palm lingering on the wood. The shop would sleep. Her purpose would not. Under the streetlight, she walked slowly, each step a benediction on ground that had carried her for years. Beauty is a stubborn thing, she thought, smiling. It insists. And tomorrow, when the bell wakes and the needle finds its path, she will insist again, stitch by steady stitch, turning ordinary fabric into the courage people wear.